right, what's up YouTube? I'm back. You guys get to listen to me talk. I get lots of questions about what size rod end does my traction bar use. I've got a CalTracks. I don't know what size rod end it uses. I've got an assassin bar. I don't know what size rod end it uses. I want to buy your traction bar. What size rod end does it use? So I figured I would just make this 10 or 12 minute video to cover all the differences between rod ends that you're gonna find in traction bars, and also I'm gonna give you enough information that you should be able to identify any of the rod ends that you do run into. Lots of times guys will call them a heim joint. That seems to be an acceptable name. It is easier though when you're on Summit or McMaster-Carr, something like that. If you call them a rod end, they seem to be easier to search for. So that's just something that I've kind of found in the time that I've been searching. So I went ahead and there's lots of videos on YouTube and etc. about AN. AN, as many of you guys know, stands for Army Navy. It's a measuring system that uses 1/16 increments. So they developed this, I believe, in World War II. You could find some more information on this at Wikipedia. I just downloaded this quick little chart, printed it out. The major thing that I wanted to cover is the fact that not only can you measure a fitting in AN, lots of times rod ends and spherical bearings are measured in AN as well. So you will see part numbers in ATEC or Summit or JEGS or whoever, and you'll see these part numbers. And you can actually make sense of the part number without reading the description, which I find to be very helpful. So just a quick little review: -3, 3/16, right? -6, 3/8, -8, ½ inch, -10, 5/8, -12, 3/4. I kind of want to focus on the -8, 10, and 12 because those are the most common size rod ends that you will find, or bolt hole sizes for the rod ends that you will find in traction bars. So a number 8 would be 8/16, which would reduce down to ½ inch. 10, 10/16 reduces to 5/8. 12 is 12/16, which reduces down to 3/4. So I have in my lineup, I have some ½ inch, some 5/8, a female, a male. These guys are also large shank, small hole. This guy is a large shank, small hole, large shank, small hole, large shank, matching hole. That's the same as this ½ inch rod end right there. Just to see a little size comparison, ½ inch or number 8 rod end here and a number 12 rod end right there. Obviously they get bigger than that. We run some 1¼ or -20 rod ends in our off-road stuff. So this is a cool chart. I will go ahead and just add this link in my description, so that way it will help with just a little reference. So remember that we can use this Army Navy measuring system, or AN, for more than just fittings. So I'm going to go ahead, break there, and then all right. So let's get this party started. I think the first place to start with is being able to measure your rod ends. You can get this inexpensive digital caliper, reads in inches, millimeters, and for whatever reason, fractions, whatever. It reads in fractions if you want to use fractions. But anyway, it's very easy to read. That's 1.15655, right? I doubt that it's accurate to that tenth down there, or that last fourth digit, but hey, you know what, whatever, it's reading there. So this thing is actually pretty accurate, does a decent job. This particular model you can get on Amazon right here for $23.99. I feel like at $23.99 there's basically no excuse not to have a digital caliper laying around. This is a really, really handy tool, and it's really inexpensive, and this one gets used every day by 5, 6, 7 of us, right? So this thing's been dropped, it gets beat on, right? And it still survives the time. I think it's been through 1 battery. So we just keep some spare batteries for it. But $23.99 does not feel like a big ask as far as being able to measure stuff. So I've got some rod ends stuff here, so we'll just go ahead and let's just measure a couple things. So I know that this is a 3/4 inch bolt, measures 743.5, right? So we'll just call it 744, right? So that is most definitely under 750. So there's a little bit of tolerance between the threads and what the bore of this 3/4 rod end should be. So what do we got on this bore? 751. So 7/1000ths clearance between the threads and the bore of this guy. Does that seem, you got a little bit of wiggle right there. You can see that there's some movement in there. There has to be some tolerance, otherwise you're not able to put stuff together. What's sometimes end up being the case in really critical tolerance situations. You wouldn't want to use the threads. You would want to get a bolt that had the proper length shank on it, because a shank will fit tighter in the end of the bore. So our stuff, we probably it doesn't see the abuse that, say, like the off-road world does, and so we just don't see the wear and tear that some applications do. But just to give you an idea, 744 on the threads right there, 751 on the ID of the bore right there. When I was in high school, I got a job pushing the broom at a mechanic shop that's actually just down the way from our building right now. It's too funny that we ended up here. And the guy that owned the place taught me this cool trick about figuring out what size bolts there are, right? So this doesn't work for what the head size is, but it does work for what size the shank of the bolt is. So it's great. I pulled these wrenches out to do this video a couple minutes ago and realized that these have my initials engraved in them. I think I stopped engraving my initials 2 years out of high school because I ended up with enough tools that it was getting obnoxious to engrave them. So that means that this wrench I've had since high school. So I just had my 20-year reunion a year ago, so that's 21 years. So I've owned this wrench for at least 21 years, which is kind of crazy. So anyway, 3/4 inch wrench, 3/4 inch bolt. That guy fits on there, right? So it's an easy, quick way to be able to check the size of a bolt. I also went ahead and grabbed a 5/8, and so you can see that doesn't. There's definitely some gap there, but no gap here. So 5/8 bolt there, and obviously doesn't fit on the 3/4. And then went ahead and grabbed a 1/2 inch wrench, fits on our 1/2 inch bolt. So this is just a super easy, quick kind of way to remember this, or quick way to identify the size of a bolt. After a while, I'm sure you guys are laughing right now like, bro, you can't tell the difference between what size bolts there are. Totally get it. Maybe some of the smaller sizes, this could be a little handy feature, but I figured I would at least bring it up because it's always been a handy trick, and I still use it to today, just to verify, like, hey, what are we sending, So yeah, so digital caliper, $23.99 on Amazon. This particular one, whoever's on Amazon selling this guy, visit the Nico store. This comes direct from the Nico tool people. I can have it tomorrow, so I think that's kind of crazy. So I think that this is worthwhile to have in your race car trailer or at your shop, wherever you work on your hot rod. And this is another quick, just easy way to check those sizes. So that's measurements, basic measurements in a nutshell. Obviously, we could get way more in depth. I've got a pile of micrometers and stuff that we do for more intricate or precise measuring stuff, but this is just, hey, will this thread into that? Is that the right size bolt for this piece, right? So we don't need to be that critical on the accuracy here. So $23.99 for our caliper, totally doable, or measure with some wrenches, whatever the situation is, whatever you got handy. That's kind of my spiel for measuring. I just wanted to touch base on that before we went any further with any of these rod ends and sizes, or talking about sizes of these rod ends. So next, let's get started. So CalTracks. Let's talk about CalTracks first. I feel like most guys have CalTracks. You will find in your CalTrack bars a left-handed 3/4 rod end and a right-handed 3/4 rod end, both of which have a 3/4 inch shank, right? You can verify that. Got our 3/4 inch wrench. 3/4 inch bolt, we'll go through the end of it. You'll also notice that I'm pretty certain this is the exact same bolt that they use, and it should be an 1 1/16 head, which, hey, you know what? We can just double check with our $23.99 caliper. And it is, yep, an 1 1/6. It's, I lied, it's an 1 1/8. So an 1 1/8 is what it would be. So sorry about that. That was a mistake. So anyway, so the back bolt's going to look something like this. I almost think it's the same deal. Grade 5, fine thread, uses a thin nylock style nut on it, and it's a 3/4 inch hole. So the front is 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch, and the back is 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch, and that will give you quite a bit of adjustment too. And since it has a left and a right in it, it makes it so when you twist the bar, it gets longer and shorter. So I wanted to go ahead, since we talked about AN just a little bit. This rod end, part number for it, well, maybe not this exact rod end, but if you went on ATEC, went on Summit, or JEGS, you could look up a QA1 4130 rod end that has the Teflon insert in it. And the part number would be an XMR, R for right, -12. -12 being 12/16 reduces down to 3/4. And that's the entire part number. So it would identify for you. XM is the series of the rod end. R means it's right-handed thread. And -12 means that it is a 3/4 shank with a 3/4 inch hole in it. All right, so I had to cut the video right there because I screwed up. But at any rate, let's go back to this. So 3/4 inch hole, 3/4 inch thread on there, 3/4 inch bolt. And so here's the thing, the thread between the rod end and the bolt is the same. So there's a jam nut. You just saw me unthread the jam nut. I'm going to thread the jam nut onto the bolt. So they're both 3/4 16 thread pitch. So this is kind of a nice feature to understand about these things, that the bolt that you use, if you stay in the fine thread world, the bolt that you use will match the thread size if the rod end has matching bore versus matching thread size on it. So hopefully that clarifies that. So if you run into the, if you're looking at your CalTracks bars, you will find, I have not run across any, just to be totally transparent, I have just not run across any that use anything but 3/4 inch rod ends. And they're often, if not always, the metal on metal series rod end. So they're the you know, the bottom, the economy rod end. We'll just say the economy rod end. They don't have this Teflon insert in them, right? They're metal to metal. And so if you've got some CalTracks that are, you know, 20 years old, you'll definitely notice that they got some metal on metal noise going on. So if you ever want to replace them, you can in fact upgrade them to this rod end. Definitely a little nicer piece. I think these are like 33 bucks or something like that per bearing, something along those lines. So that's 3/4 or XMR-12, and if you wanted a left, it'd be an XML-12. So hopefully that clarifies 3/4. We're gonna move on to the next size rod end. Next size rod end in my lineup here is the rod end that would be used on an assassin bar. So assassin bars still use a 3/4 inch shank. Like, I'm gonna unthread this rod end jam nut right there and go ahead and thread it onto my 3/4 inch bolt, but you'll notice that it does not go through that hole. So they use a 1/2 inch hole, like more of like a 4-link, like think like a race car 4-link kind of thing, where the bolt hole is much smaller. What does that do for us? That makes it so we can put more adjustment holes in the same place because the bolt's so much smaller. Think about these bolts having to have a hole that big in order for them to go through. So how many more bolt holes can you put in that same space, right? So that's the concept. So you will find on your assassin bars that there'll be a 3/4 inch shank and a 1/2 inch hole. So this particular rod end would be called, if we were going to look at our QA1 stuff, this would be an XMR, because it's the XM series, it's a right-handed rod end. It'd be a -12-8. -8 being 1/2 inch. So you got your 1/2 inch bolt threaded through it right there. You got your -12 jam nut threaded onto your -12 size thread or your 3/4 16 size thread. So hopefully that makes sense. Like you could verify this part number very easily. It's R for right-handed, -12 for the thread size here, and -8 for the bolt size. All right, so then moving forward, and FYI, so on my traction bars, I will actually grab a spring plate for the next section of the video and show you also that there are some tab width issues jumping between these rod ends, but this would be the rear rod end if you bought one of my traction bars. I use this in the rear, and then I use this guy in the front. So same deal, -12 or 3/4 inch 16 thread right there. I'm going to unthread the jam nut again, thread it onto this nut. Right, just going through the verification here. Oh, I can also use my wrench. So got my 3/4 inch stem or my 3/4 inch thread, but you'll notice that the hole size, smaller than that one, bigger than that one, is 5/8. So there is our next size rod end. So this is the rod end that I would use in the front section of my traction bar. So the rear of my traction bar will be this -12-8 left-handed, and the front will be a -12-, you're right, -10. because that hole is 5/8, right? And so, like I said, I'm going to include this. You can download that little chart, and this gives you the cheat codes for what those AN values are. So in my traction bar, this will be the front, this will be the back. It'll have corresponding bolts. Hopefully that kind of airs that out. So the next section, I'm going to go and grab a spring plate and then show you the difference between the fact that unfortunately the ball widths on these rod ends, the actual spread, are unfortunately different. So that'll be our next section of the video. Hang tight. All right, so I mentioned earlier, we were just talking about these rod ends. It gave me an idea. I went and grabbed some spring plates to show you guys some differences. And I also got another idea when I went and grabbed these spring plates that I want to do a 15-20 minute video. I don't know if it'll take me that long, but I'm going to do a video about all the different types of spring plates that you can order. So, I mean, you can see right there that that guy's got a front shock mount and has a support gusset that has a cross member style tab in it. You might notice that that's the same tab that you would use on my S10 kit or the Chevy 2 kit. This is in particular is in fact a Chevy 2 lower spring plate. And then this guy is a standard replacement, multiple holes for the traction bar, 3/4 inch bolt holes for your Calvert style traction bar, and multiple holes in the back for the shocks. So this would be like a standard replacement for say your Nova or Camaro or kind of anything that uses a 3-inch housing and uses a CalTracks size bar. So I just wanted to show what the kind of advantage with using the 1/2-inch bolt is. So you can see that these guys are super close to the same height. The 3/4 3-inch hole one is a little bit low, or is a little bit higher, a little bit more ground clearance, about a 1/2 inch. I wanted to add the meat, so I got this 1/2-inch bolt down a good bit more, which allowed me to get more angle out of the bar. So I would argue that if I was going with this guy, just to backpedal for a second, I also make it without this 5th hole right here, this 5th or 4th hole, which makes that whole bracket that much smaller. So that helps with some ground clearance if you're still looking to run a 1/2-inch hole and you want some more ground clearance. But this gives you an idea. 3/4 inch bolt holes take up lots of space. 1/2-inch bolt holes don't take up nearly as much space. So the plates are pretty close together. They're not identical, but they are in fact close. I get lots of questions about it. This center bolt hole is the factory Calvert spacing. That's the same distance from the top of the plate to the center of this bolt hole. That's the Calvert one. So if you're just looking for a straight replacement, or say you want tie down tabs, or you're looking to move that shock, then just 3/4 inch bolt hole, there's nothing wrong with that. So having showed you guys that, this is what brings me to the next part. So obviously you can see these spring plates are totally different. Shock in the front, shock in the back, different style gussets and stuff like that, but they're effectively still like somewhat of a modular unit. This guy is going to use our 3/4 by 3/4 rod end or our -12 rod end, and this guy is going to use our -12-8 rod end. 3/4 inch threads for both ends of those rod ends, 3/4 inch hole and a 1/2-inch hole. I think you'll be able to see it in the video. You can see that the head width or the ball width of these guys are not in fact the same. That 3/4 inch rod end, 7/8 of an inch wide. That 3/4 by 1/2 inch rod end is 3/4 of an inch wide. McMaster-Carr is a great reference. So you can download this print. This is a 3/4 by 3/4 rod end, and it'll show you that 7/8 ball width right there. So this is a great resource. Like, you can get these guys. It'll show you how much thread there is. It'll show you the diameter of the end of the rod end right there. It'll show you that head width at the top, and then show you that bore diameter and the width of that ball. So the width of these balls right there, that's what sets your tab width. So tab width is the width between the tabs, right? This could be shocks or 1 inch. This guy's 7/8. This guy is 3/4. So that matches there, but will not go in there. This will go in there, but that has massive slop. That and the bolt wouldn't match, right? Like, think about how bad that bolt sits in there. But there's 3/4 inch tab width there. Fits fantastic there. Bam, we got that set up. Same goes here. Let's put that rod end in there. Same goes there. So if you're swapping a 3/4 inch bolt hole traction bar plate on your CalTracks system, you can reuse your factory bolt. It just threads in there. If you're going to swap a plate on your assassin bar system, you get the 1/2 inch holes and you can reuse your bolt and your rod end there. What is cool is that if you've got a CalTracks system and you would like to use this rod end with a smaller bolt hole in the bore, all you have to do is order, I stock these -12-8s or 3/4 by 1/2 inch rod ends. I stock them, I have the bolts for them. So you could take your CalTracks system, thread a new rod end in the end, thread that new bolt, push that new bolt in there, and then you have this many more adjustment holes versus there. Do you need that? Maybe not, maybe you do. It just depends on what the end user is. What are your goals? What are your things that you want to do? I'll cover it more in depth on the spring plate only video, but I also make this without this top bolt hole here. I make this with one less shock mount hole right here. I make this with an offset shock mount. There's just all kinds of different variations. But what I mainly wanted to get out of this is the tab width between the 3/4. The 3/4 by 3/4 rod end is different than the tab width for the 3/4 by 1/2 inch. 3/4 by 5/8 is the same 3/4. So, 3/4 by 5/8 is the same 3/4 tab width. So I just wanted to make sure that that's understood. And if you have any questions about it, we could get out our caliper and measure our rod end. We can measure our bore, we can measure our thread. And then you can also consult McMaster-Carr and you can actually get these prints. They don't even charge you for these prints. The other cool feature of this is, remember in my roll cage video is talking about e-drawings. You can download this step file or the SolidWorks file direct from McMaster-Carr and open it in e-drawings. So then you can rotate this thing around in real 3D space and then get your tape measure out inside a SolidWorks or an e-drawings and then measure this stuff. So hopefully this is a good addition to what we're talking about as far as these rod ends are concerned, and the difference between the plates and the difference between the size of the rod ends and the bolt holes. So next up, we'll talk about the smaller rod ends. The next step, let's talk about different style rod ends. So these guys probably look super familiar to you, the 3/4, the 3/4, 5/8, the 3/4, 1/2 inch. The reduced head bore size shouldn't be that uncommon. I did bring out a 1/2 inch one just to kind of show a difference in size. And then here's a 1/2 inch jam nut. That threads on there no problem, right? Threads on there nice. Also, here's our 1/2 inch bolt that we use in this rod end right here for the traction bar spring plate. There's the jam nut. You'll notice the jam nut threads right on there the same as well. So it's really convenient that the threads match the size that the rod end is called out on. So this guy 1/2 inch, the threads are the same. They interchange, so like that looks funny now with that big giant bolt in there versus this bolt inside of that size rod end. In my opinion, they look funny, but you can see that stuff all goes together. And so then there's our jam nut that goes on there, and you just saw me interchange the jam nut onto there, right? We have another style rod end. So they come in two basic variations, male, female. Male has male external threads. Females have female threads, right? And the thread pitch works exactly the same. So this is a specialty high misalignment rod end, so is this guy. But they're both 5/8 or -10 here. And you'll notice, oh no, that's not gonna work. Sorry, this one's 1/2 inch, that one's 5/8. Let's do it this way. So there's our 1/2 inch rod end, 1/2 inch hole right there, 1/2 inch threads, and these guys thread together. You may have even seen some of the aftermarket sway bar kits do something along these lines, because now that gives you an easy adjustment point with misalignment at the top and misalignment at the bottom. So female rod end, male rod end, and you'll notice that the threads are interchangeable. And we can also just quickly check to see what size the bore diameter is. We've got our 1/2 inch bolt. That bore diameter is obviously 1/2 inch. And then, as you saw earlier, 30 seconds ago, when I tried to thread, you can really see it when they're sitting next to each other. You can see how much different the sizes are. There's a 5/8 shank with a 1/2 inch hole in it. So still got our 1/2 inch hole there, but it's closer to the 5/8 shank. So you could see that all the numbering on these things all runs down and does the same thing. So there's a 5/8 thread right there. Here's a 5/8 bolt, 5/8 jam nut. Come on, Matt. See the jam nut interchanges on that 5/8 bolt as well. So this is, I mean, I find this to be really convenient. You don't have to have special taps or dies, and all these pieces are interchangeable and they're easy to identify. We can stack all those rod ends on that 1/2" bolt just like that. Look at all the variation that we have with those 3 different rod ends with the same bolt, hit the same bolt bore on all of those guys. So yeah, that's that kind of wraps this up. These are kind of cool. They so you can see that you're only going to get this amount of misalignment out of that bolt right there, where this one you get that much misalignment out of it. So that's significantly more misalignment. So you'll see these often in steering. I'll use them in the ends of my wishbones as well, like for the rear suspension. I'll use these in the wishbones because it gives me that much misalignment up and down on the wishbone. Things of that sort. So these guys you can get from McMaster-Carr. You can find all the dimensions just like I showed you on this print. You find all the dimensions right there on McMaster-Carr. I think the last thing that I want to cover is traction bars themselves. 3/4 right hand. The right-handed weld bung has no kind of marks on it, whereas the left-handed weld bung has this line on it. Now, there were I know some guys have talked about like, hey man, why don't you use a hex on the end? And my opinion on this is that if the threads aren't clean enough for this bar to move freely, then you need to take it back apart and clean the threads, put some anti-seize on them, grab a thread chaser, right? Or maybe the rod end needs to be, have a tap run down it. And then if you're getting under there and you're putting 6, 8 flats of preload in your car to make it go straight, it's probably something else going on. So I am personally of the opinion 1, 2, maybe 3 flats, but probably not at that point. I'm probably looking for some anti-roll bar input instead. So that is my personal opinion on tuning the chassis. I'm sure you could find somebody to disagree. I'm sure everybody's got some other ideas and some other things. So that's why I have not put, that's why I don't use the hex style ones. This saves some space. They're predictable. They weld up nice. They're clean. The threads in these particular bungs that I get always come really nice. And since we're sitting here talking about it, we can thread our 3/4 inch bolt in there on the right hand side. Right? That's always awesome. I think it's a clean setup. These are 1.25" 120 wall tubing, 4130. 4130 bungs in the end. We Scotch-Brite at the ends. We get some beautiful welds. These bars are obviously in compression. And then I have one more feature. I think I'm going to cut this up a little bit and let's talk about traction bars one more time and we'll edit this video. My standard traction bar, 1.25" 120 wall, chromoly. They are TIG welded. We get some good gas coverage on there. We polish the ends of these guys with red Scotch-Brite. It's not big scratches. Get this nice, beautiful weld. I've had some guys ask me about, hey, how come you don't use a hex on one end so you could put preload in it? I'm of the opinion that if these bars, if the threads inside of here are boogered up or they have gunk on them or the rod end has a nick on the end of it or something along those lines, then you should be, and it's hard to turn, you should be taking this apart, tap these guys, clean the threads up, right? That's where my mind goes. And so then the next thing is, well, what if I want to put preload in? Well, I'm of the opinion that if you need to wrench on this thing to be able to put 6, 7, 8 flats of preload in it, then you've got way too much going on, right? So I feel like at that point in time, I'm of the opinion that you should be looking to the anti-roll bar for doing that. This bar should move easy. You put a little bit of anti-seize on both ends of it and it should move really easy. It should be very easy to by hand put one flat in it. So then the next one is, or the next complaint about not having a hex is, well, how do I tighten the jam nuts? So I agree with that. I think I'm going to go ahead and add to my traction bars. I'm going to manufacture this little plasma cut nut, and then this guy will slide over. I made this too big, by the way, because I didn't know how big the weld was going to be. This will fit much better on the production one, but I'm going to put this hex right smack dab in the middle. And you're probably asking why in the middle. Maybe you're not asking. But if I put this smack dab in the middle and get some tack welds on, not some tack welds, but say do an inch on both sides, two spots, 1 inch on either side, well, you can put your crescent wrench where there isn't anything in the way to be able to hold that guy, to be able to wrench this guy tight and wrench that guy tight, right? And you could technically use this to make, to put your tension or your preload adjustments in it. So I think that's going to be in the future. We're just going to start putting this this hex on the traction bar, unless people don't want it, unless they think it's awful. I think it would actually still probably look really nice. And then just from a standpoint of having to be able to tighten those jam nuts, I think that would be a good addition to these guys. So there you go. That's the traction bar in a nutshell. Again, oh, by the way too, the left-handed side has this line in it. The right-handed side has no line. And there's my right-handed 3/4 inch bolt. Threads in. And any one of these 3/4 rod ends, right? Let's just go ahead and go through this just to prove. Any one of these guys will fit in that 3/4 inch thread. I don't have any left-handed ones, otherwise I threaded it in the left-hand side. But so here's your examples. This is the end of the video. My phone went dead and the gimbal-y guy, whatever the hell that thing's called, went dead. But just wanted to wrap up. I just threaded all these 3/4 inch rod ends in there. Oh, I know what I was talking about. So switching your spring plate over. So here's that 3/4 by 3/4 rod end threaded into this traction bar that fits in this 3/4 spring plate that looks just like a Calvert one. Here's our 3/4 by 1/2 inch that fits these adjustment holes right here. And this guy just interchanges, and you can just thread this right in there. So hopefully I answered a whole bunch of questions. I feel like no matter what, I missed some stuff, but I did my half-ass best to cover a lot of the basic information and some basic stuff that I think will help you in the long run to be able to figure out, to understand what we're talking about, maybe when we're on the phone, or maybe when you're reading on the internet, or you're on McMaster-Car, or you're looking at rod ends or bearings or something like that. Know that this AN scale can help you. Know that you can get this digital caliper for 23 bucks, and that rod ends there's no like black voodoo, right? There's no black magic inside of any of these rod ends. They are called out by their sizes. The threads are the same size. So if you've got tools, you've got taps and dies to repair normal fine thread stuff, you can repair rod ends now too, right? Take a little ding out. I always try to ship these guys either threaded into the tube so they don't get damaged, or I will take the jam nut and thread it to the end like that and then bag it. So that way, at least that first thread that threads this guy on, at least that thread never gets damaged. So hopefully that covers that. I didn't talk about these aluminum traction bars, but they look cool. They are a little bit lighter, especially when I counter drill them. I bought a 8-inch long 11/16 drill bit, so I can drill 16 inches of material out. And I think the calculation, the calculation said like 1.5 pounds. I feel like when I weighed it, it was something very close to that as well. So those are cool. There's no way for me to put a hex in them, unfortunately. So these will always just be smooth. But like we talked about, I feel like you really shouldn't need the hex, but this will probably be a thing. Maybe I'll just do an option to have these guys threaded on there, because I think it looks nice without having the extra bulk and stuff on there. So enjoy the video. Hopefully it's informative. I feel like this is going to be a platform. These are going to be the platforms of types of videos I'm going to be doing to help share the knowledge. So it's not just like, what is this size? What is this thing? Like, here's the information. I try to gather it the best I can. I'll cite some resources. Hopefully this helps. So appreciate you watching. What do you got to say? Like and subscribe or some nonsense like that. So appreciate you guys following along, and until next time.